Hello and welcome back to Faces of Family Business. Now, if you're like me and you love eating out or going to the cafe for a treat, there's a high chance that you have eaten or drunk something that has been provided by our next guest and his company. I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Lynas, who's the Group Managing Director of Lynas Foodservice. Andrew, you're very, very welcome to Faces of Family Business. You're from a family business, you've taken it over from your father. Why are family businesses so important, particularly to our economy, do you think?
I think if you think of Northern Ireland, we're feels like the most connected little country in the world, but even within family businesses, there are just so many connections, and there are so many small, medium and large size businesses in Northern Ireland. And to me, they're like the heartbeat of our local economy. They make such an impact, but they also affect so many people's lives in terms of the economy and their wider, I suppose, livelihood.
Yeah. Now, for those that aren't aware, although I'm pretty sure you'll have seen one of their trucks on the road, what does your business do?
So really simplistically, if you eat a meal out of home, then that is our market. We're the classic middleman. We deliver lots of goods to pubs, restaurants, cafes, schools, hospitals, lots of different things like that. We have about 3,000 customers right throughout the island of Ireland, north and south, and also into Scotland.
Now, that's not how the business started, though. Tell us a little bit about your family business history.
Yeah, well, like so many great family business stories, there was no idea, there was no strategy. My grandfather, in his mid-50s, fell out with his boss, who was a greengrocer, and decided that he was going to start his own fishmonger business. So he started with a tiny little shop in Brook Street in Coleraine. Went quite well, and he opened up a second shop in Ballymoney. And then, unfortunately, he had a series of heart attacks. And so my father, at the age of 16, Norman, had this decision: do I follow my head or do I follow my heart? He was meant to go to Queen's and study law, but he chose the heart option and went into the fish business. Hand on heart, he absolutely hated it, hated the smell of it, and he realised as he was dating certain ladies that Old Spice didn't actually cover the smell of fresh fish. Look, he took the business on, and then a chance encounter, kind of early 70s, with the Morelli family, who are another great family business. One of the cousins said to Norman, any chance you can get your hands on these frozen fish portions? This was pretty innovative at the time, and Dad, being a salesman, said yes. He brings a pallet in from Bournemouth. He finds a freezer at the back of their house on Lodge Road, and in one sense, the rest is history. We get into frozen food, and really, through lots of progressions, we've become the business that we are today. And
tell me some of your earliest memories of the business from being a wee lad.
Yeah, so I remember we used to be based in the middle of Coleraine on Long Commons. I remember going in there and actually buying little bacon treats from Tato, but I also just remember being in the offices, being in the freezer. I think my brothers locked me in there once, one particular time, before health and safety really was a big thing. And yeah, I just remember hearing Dad come home often in the evenings, talking about stories, being in the trucks. One of the funny memories was during one of our periods of unrest, shall we say, or the Drumkey crisis, as many will remember. A number of our drivers didn't want to go in the trucks, and Dad thought, well, I've got 3 sons, they'll go in the trucks. So we were all sent on lorries to service, let's just say, the wider Portadown area during that. So they were some of the funnier memories that I can remember.
And you're one of 3 brothers, which I know. Did you always want to join the family business?
I think Dad ultimately hoped that one of us would come into the business. Look, he was really fortunate. When I was about 16, at the University of Ulster were doing this incredible family business thing. They were bringing in speakers from all over Europe and all over the world, and the only commitment they asked from the family was everyone has to turn up for these 6 sessions at the Galgorm. I thought it was a pretty sweet gig for me because I was 16 and I got out of school, so I thought this was great. And I remember going along, not having a clue at that particular moment. And these speakers were suddenly challenging you with scenarios of, your mum and dad die in a car crash tomorrow, what happens? And we were all like rabbit in the headlight. Oh, right, this could happen, I don't know. And the big thing was it got conversations started. We had conversations where we were forced round the table to say, well, are you interested or not? I hedged my bets at 16 and said, well, maybe. And I think from that, it definitely did start something, lit a fire inside of me. I went to Dundee University, studied law and accountancy, realized I didn't want to be a lawyer or an accountant, and thought, look, why not do the family business? And so I said to Dad, look, I'm going to try this for a few years. Let's see what it looks like. And nearly 20 years later, I'm still here.
One of the beauties of family business, I always say, there's nothing more powerful than your story and being able to share your story. And yours is a rich one, for sure. How do you think that translates, or what does it mean?
I think the art of storytelling is so important, and actually they're carried down through generations. So I never actually got to meet my grandfather Bobby, who started the business, nor my great-grandfather. And so, but a story from him is carried down to me, 3-4 generations later. He was a coffin maker, and apparently he was a very good coffin maker, but a terrible businessman. And so he got into debt. And so my grandfather Bobby had to cycle from Corrigan out to Kilray every Friday night to pay off a moneylender. He told my father, Norman, that story, and he said, never get into debt. Dad tells me that story, never get into debt. And it's one of those stories that I followed. We just, as a business, we build our warehouses, we buy our trucks, whatever it is, when we've made the money. We just don't like debt, and we don't use debt. Now, lots of businesses have used debt smartly and really well, but it's a story that's carried down through generations. And in fact, my father passed away nearly 4 years ago, but one of the last things he ever said to me was around keep plenty of cash in the bank. So it's just funny, Ian, how those stories, I think, get carried down.
Just on that idea of story and telling your story, as you know, the Faces of Family Business campaign came about as a result of an exhibition we ran at Ulster University with the Northern Ireland Family Business Forum and Harbinson Mulholland, and you were asking that to choose 3 particular images that you felt best represented your family business story. Can you talk to me about the 3 images that you put forward? What do they mean, and how do they represent the Lynas story best?
I think the first image and the most obvious one was always the picture of Bobby Lynas, the fish shop, where it all began, because every story has to have that beginning point, and that is so poignant in our story. And I just love that image. I also think that my grandfather was ahead of his time. I know that our marketing team still think it's one of the coolest shop logos that they've seen from that particular moment. The clarity, just the lovely black background and everything around that. And the second one was also that image inside the shop of my grandfather, actually of my aunt, and also of Dad. And I think it speaks of that family. And just, as I said, I never got to meet Bobby, and I know that one of my dad's kind of longings in life was, he said, I would love to bring Bobby back for a day. I'd love to show him the business, and love to show him the three of you, and myself and my 2 brothers, and what we've got up to, but also the business. And I think it would have blown his mind just to see the sheer scale of everything, because actually Bobby was pretty skeptical that frozen food would ever work. Thankfully, he was proven wrong. And then the final image, again, it's family, and it's one of Dad and I sitting in one of our food outlets. Again, we were just wanting to, I suppose, be so proud of our heritage in that moment. But also, as I mentioned, Dad passed away a few years ago, and so it's a lovely image of just he and I sitting together. We definitely had our moments in family business, working as fathers and son do, but it was also, we had so many special moments where we agreed on a lot of stuff, and I think it's a really nice image that just captures that father and son together.
If you don't mind me touching on that, your father passing away, how does a loss like that set up how you go forward? Does it make it more difficult because he's not there? Does it give you more of a sense of, I need to continue this legacy? How does that have an effect on you?
I think it has multiple effects, to be honest, Ian, but I think Dad was a big believer. He had maybe suffered, locally in Corrigan. Bobby, my grandfather, was a real raconteur. He was a big character, and Dad always felt that, am I ever in his shadow? And obviously he created an incredible business, was an incredible business person, huge charitable works. His Christian faith was just so vital to him as it is to me. But I also think that Dad wanted the business to succeed, and he wanted me to succeed. And I always say in any generational takeover or switch, it takes two to tango, and both sides need to want it to succeed. And I'm so grateful that he wanted to do that. And in one sense, it was incredibly difficult. He had a stroke. We then found out he had a brain tumor, and he passed away within 12 weeks. But in that 12 weeks, we got to say goodbye to him. And in one sense, it felt like he said, look, I've almost taught you everything I know. You now have to go and carve out your path in that. But he also released me about 6 months prior to his illness, where he said, look, at any time, whatever happens with this business, if you pass it on, if you sell it, if you do whatever, feel free to do whatever. That there should never be a burden. Legacy shouldn't be about burden for me. It should be about, well, is it the right thing that it's to be passed on to the next generation? But it was incredibly hard losing him. And then obviously that was in late 2019. And then we obviously went into the joys of COVID, which for our industry was about as tough as you get. So to not have him there and help you navigate that was really difficult.
Yeah. Families, obviously, whenever they work together and work towards a common good, there's nothing better as a source of strength. But we also know families don't always get on. So how have you overcome any conflict or any disagreement in your own family business?
Thankfully, like Dad and I didn't have too many real stand-up rows, but I think in those debates and those arguments, we both probably looked to the common good of, okay, what's the right thing to do for the company? And again, I go back to that. Dad strongly believed in legacy and handing over and wanting, I suppose, his ceiling to be my floor, and he really believed that. And I think the really great family businesses, you see that you'll have arguments, you'll have fights, you'll have those frustration moments, but actually does the generation before that's handing over want that generation to move on, to go to another level? And every day and every moment, I knew my father wanted me to do that. And I think that's what makes a difference in those really awkward conversations. It doesn't matter, because actually both of you are saying we want this to be better.
Yeah.
A great story of maybe succession I remember is that our sales team, we have a lot of salespeople who go out on the road, and they came to his door with an issue. And I just become managing director. And he took the person out and he said, Stephen, that's the wrong door. He knocked my door, he opened it and said, he's the boy to sort that problem out. And it took him doing those moments, because people, they kind of just fall back on what they know. And Norman knew how to answer their queries. And he said, no, you've got to give Andrew his chance.
It's not just about handing over the business from one generation to the next. It's about handing over the workforce as well. And quite a lot of people obviously would have been in the business from your father's time through to yours. How do you then take the business forward without allowing the legacy to cripple you, but then having that drive to grow it? And I know you've diversified into other areas and avenues. How do you take that on, paying homage to what's gone before, but as you say, then using that as your floor to then launch it on?
You make a pile of mistakes, which is, I think, a good starting point. But I think I've learned that you probably have to walk before you can run. But in those early days, it was finding small wins, small projects where you could show, look, we want to take the business forward. But to be fair to Dad, he'd built a good senior team, and I got to know those individuals. And often you don't realize that actually the staff want you to succeed too, because ultimately they want the business to go to the next generation. They want the business to get larger. It gives job security, it gives greater opportunities. But I was really, really, really lucky to have staff who've been with our business 10, 15, 20 plus years, who helped me in those moments. But actually Dad was also like, there's sometimes no substitute for hard work. I said this recently at a sales meeting where he said, son, sometimes you just have to be the first car there and the last car to leave. And you have to earn your stripes and those kind of things. And I think that was important in those early years, to show that we are committed, we will work hard in this business too, and we want us all to succeed. And I think the values we have are really important to us. We have a charitable trust. We give 12.5% of our net profits. That's really important to us as a family, and our staff know that. We don't publicize it. We don't, talk about it very much in a wider sense, but we want people to know that that is part of our legacy. And staff like that, because a lot of that is local. And I think that, coupled with, we have a full-time pastoral care member of staff. So we have someone whose job it is to look after the staff. That's not an HR function. That is, as we said, unfortunately, funerals. That is crisis moments in people's lives, addictions, things like that. That, to us, is as important as selling food sometimes.
How important then, just to tease up on that, because if you think about it logistically, probably doesn't make any sense for you to be based up in the North Coast. Now, I know you have operations in the South, but how important is it for family businesses to give back to the community, to be that force for good, that whenever they work well, they work incredibly well? Talk to me about that then.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at a map of Ireland and thought, where's the worst place to put a food service business? It's Korean. It's just, it's not in the middle, basically. And obviously we're logistics, fundamentally. That's what we do. We have about 120 trucks go out and about throughout Ireland and Scotland every day. But we are rooted to the North Coast. We love where we're from. We love Korean. We love the wider North Coast area. That's where our staff are from. And that is so important to us. So be it churches, charities, local football clubs, rugby clubs, Gaelic clubs, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we give back to those. That's important as to how we can, give back, but also integrate ourselves. I'm from, the wider Korean area, and I love it, and I'm really proud of it, and I want it to thrive. So I want other businesses in the town and the area to do well. I'm in hospitality, and I love, when I think of all the local coffee shops, and all of those businesses, those small micro businesses that grow into huge businesses, I don't think we celebrate that enough. The hospitality industry, we talk about those moments. Some of your best moments in life are usually over a meal, over a drink, having the crack, having fun with family or friends, and I think there's such richness in that we don't celebrate in the wider economy around what hospitality does.
Yeah, definitely. Can I touch back on, you mentioned whenever you did come into the business, but you took over as MD relatively young. Was it 26?
27.
27, which is incredible, but it comes with a lot of pressure, obviously. And I know you still had your dad there to mentor you and guide you, but how do you deal with taking over a business at that relatively early age and being able to deal with that, manage an already experienced team that are there? Talk to me about those dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back, I wonder if I could have told my 27-year-old self, maybe just hold off a couple of years, but what I brought in my 20s and 30s was that energy. And I see that in our own staff now. Still consider myself relatively young at 42, but I see that energy, and I think, and zeal, I'll call it, that I brought, that we can run through those walls. Why not? Well, why wouldn't we do X, Y, Z? Well, we should just go further into the Republic of Ireland. Well, why wouldn't we open a food outlet? Well, why wouldn't we go to Scotland? And I think there's that ambition and that zeal. And I recognise that I have now 15 years experience being a managing director, and yet I am only 42. So there's a huge win in that, but I've probably have a lot of life experience. And so I think that's been really helpful to our business. And we've seen that real mix of youth and experience, in our board. We have quite a number of staff in their 40s and even late 30s. And then we've got some really nice experience in the 50s. And I think mixing those two together, Ian, has been really helpful in our business. But I'm acutely aware that I need to, I suppose, re-energize and reinvent myself. And so I've been fortunate to be able to go to a firm in America called Gordon Foodservice, which is a huge food service company in the States, massive family-owned business, about 20 billion turnover. I've been able to go on different exchanges and experience businesses in different countries too. So that's been really helpful to my professional development, but also just keeping me sharp and fresh.
How do you balance that desire to grow and the desire to push into new areas with you still want to retain those values at the heart? Does that become harder as you grow, or how do you manage that? I suppose the non-financial goals along with the financial.
I think it does become harder the larger you are, because the numbers you're talking about are bigger and can become more complicated, especially as we have a strong aversion to debt in the business. So I think mixing those is really hard. But I think, as I said, having the full-time pastoral care, having the charitable trust gives you other angles and other thoughts about what is success. But actually, my wife just challenged me last week in that very thing. She challenges me in a great way about just saying, well, what is success? she said, you have to remember those 650 people are relying on you to make good decisions, Andrew, for their livelihood, for their families' livelihood. And I think it's those kind of things that can be a good pressure. So pressure's good, but you don't want that to be overbearing and just all powerful. But actually, that's a good pressure in saying, maybe I don't take that risk because actually I've got this amount of staff who are relying on me to make good decisions.
Now, you mentioned government briefly. What more do you think government could do to support either family businesses generally or family businesses in your particular sector? Is there anything more can be done?
We've been right in the front lines of the Windsor Framework and the protocol, being a business that brings in goods from GB into Northern Ireland and obviously Southern Ireland. So that's been a right pain, if I'm being honest.
Talk to me about the challenge of that, because I know from talking to you before, it's been quite a lot to get your head around with that, and you're progressing and your understanding of it. And one of the beauties of being a family is you just get on with it. Whatever challenge is there, you overcome. But sometimes you'd like the challenge not to be there in the first place. But talk to me about that process and how you got through it.
I think it's interesting as an outsider, maybe as a business person looking into a political issue, you suddenly realise the complete absence of trust on both sides in terms of UK government and the EU. And I'll probably say /Irish government in that scenario. And so Northern Ireland businesses have been so pragmatic and just got on with it. But the frustration comes where in the world of food service, I'm saying, look, unlike a retailer, all my goods don't stay in Northern Ireland. They go into the Republic of Ireland because do you want me to say, oh, the lemon cheesecake can go into the south, but the strawberry one can't? That's nonsensical. We know that as we figure that out. And we were saying that practically. And I think, but it all stems from an absence of trust of, well, can I trust that you'll give us the right data? Can I trust that the UK and the EU government can work together? And our hope is long term that they will, because ultimately we need frictionless trade. And I take a big picture view, which is it's good for NI PLC, but we now need to sell the benefits of being in two markets, and we've not done a good job on that. And I think the frustration for people like me in agri-food has been, we told you this would be a problem, 3-4 years ago, and we keep telling you it's going to be a problem, and you just keep ignoring us. What would I say that we could change? You look at the island of Ireland and you go, oh, here's Northern Ireland, here's the Republic. Republic is on like 5th gear or 6th gear if you take a car analogy. We're probably in about 3rd gear at the minute. One of the biggest single reasons for that is corporation tax difference. Okay. The Irish government have had this policy now for 20, 30 years, and it's been phenomenal. And we see that in our pubs and restaurants and hotels that we serve. And to me, it's just so obvious that this is probably the main economic difference between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. We both got good skill systems. Housing's probably easier up north, and it's that frustration of going, it feels pretty obvious from a distance, and then our tax take could probably increase even though the percentage comes down. I'll leave the economists to explain all of that, but that just seems one of the most obvious. And I suppose in my sector of hospitality, you have a VAT rate of 13.5% in Southern Ireland and 20% here in Northern Ireland. And it's that nuance that the Irish government have figured out, actually the food and beverage, we can take a lower VAT rate because we encourage more people to eat out. They spend more money, we get a higher tax take. And that's a real frustration, I know, for Northern Ireland businesses, for Scotland businesses, because a lot of that policy is dictated by London. And a VAT rate change in hospitality for food and beverage would be huge. Yeah. I mean, we have customers who are finding 2024 as tough a year as they have ever found. And I think that government can get smarter around how they even incentivize taxation in general around family businesses who tend to be in people who will invest long term in an area. Their jobs are pumping money into that local economy and not taking it away. So, I mean, it may seem obvious, of course, I'll say lower taxes, but I think when you look at this island, you have to say it's one of the main differences.
But hopefully it's not all doom and gloom. It's still challenging, and we have the return of local government. What optimism do you have then going forward?
Look, I think it's great we have local government because we can make those big decisions. But I also hope that our government aren't afraid to think holistically and not just have the London give me more money, but actually how can Northern Ireland generate a bit more money? How can we be clever? How do we get inward investment? All the wonderful things this country has. One of the most, I'm biased, but where I live, I think is the most spectacular coastline in the island of Ireland. And yet we can do so much more. We have incredible, brands and businesses, your Bushmills whiskey, all of those iconic, places like Giant's Causeway, and we just could do so much more.
Touch again on the idea of succession. You mentioned your family, your wife, you've got 3 kids. Thinking about the future, that idea of family legacy and looking forward, what are your thoughts on that at this stage? Have you got a plan? Have you already started talking to the kids about what they might be interested in, or is it far too early for that?
We do, even now at this young age, 9, 7 and 3, we do try and teach our kids that they are very privileged. But there is a responsibility with the position that they have. I think at different times, Ruby and Patrick, who are my eldest 2, have both said they're going to work in Lynas's. Patrick, our middle child, has said, I'm going to take over, and we've had to explain to him and enlighten him that that just doesn't happen just because he's a boy, even though my father, Norman, probably would have appreciated that. I have 2 wonderful daughters, and whoever's best, if any of them want to take over. So we've had those conversations, and I love them being in the business, running around the place, because I think that's important. I was there, my brothers were there. I think staff like to see that. But equally, I have to be so clear with them, look, there's no pressure in this. I want them to do whatever they have been called to, whatever they've been gifted to do. And so that's the number one thing for me. There's no doubt, I probably at times would love, or thought about what would have been like to have my brothers in the business. I think we'd have killed each other. But equally, there's something about having safety in numbers. So I don't know if any of the kids will come in, but I want them to understand the legacy that our business has regardless, and that privilege and responsibility is so important. My mum and dad were very, very good at teaching us that from a young age, and our job is to leave it in a better shape and also leave our community, our area where we live, in better shape.
Last question. If there's anyone watching this who's a next generation family member thinking about taking over, or indeed even a current gen that's starting to think about the succession process or that idea of passing over a legacy, what's maybe one final piece of advice you would give anyone?
1, take your time. Take your time to know the business, to understand the business, to understand the people. Don't rush in thinking that you are all that. I think is the first thing. But secondarily, if you've decided and you really love it, be passionate, but accept that it will take a bit of you. It will take a lot of your life. I love what I do, but I work long hours, and there are moments where there are decisions made that do impact my wife and my 3 kids. And that is the reality of family business, and so you have to be prepared for that. Go in with your eyes wide open in that, but if you've got that passion and that desire, there's nothing better than being your own boss. There's nothing better than growing family businesses, because I believe that the staff and the people in communities benefit hugely from family businesses.
So you heard it here first. Follow your passion and work hard at that passion, and surround yourself with great people. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing your story and your insights, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Faces of Family Business.
What an incredible collection of family businesses, right from ice cream to construction to retail and food services, a whole variety, demonstrating the great strength that sector is to the economy.
Yeah, and hopefully you've enjoyed, just like us, hearing more of their story. What incredible stories, history, legacy, tradition, but some great examples of innovation as well. Absolutely fantastic.
And some of the common themes that came up in this series are things like caring for employees, things like community interest, really powerful forces, though not losing sight of hard work and monitoring a business and monitoring it well.
But huge optimism for the future as well. And one of the common things we touched on was the issue of succession. And I just love that idea of the current generation's ceiling being the next generation's floor.
It's a great visual image, and I think many of the businesses that we have interviewed have demonstrated that that has very much been the case in this part of the world.
We hope you've enjoyed this series, and hopefully you're going to tune in for the next series of Faces of Family Business.